So here we have Cale Wassermann, the head coach at SIUE. Cale, I appreciate you taking the time to join me today, and looking forward to picking your brain. I know you've got a lot of experience and in different roles and different schools. If we go back to your career, you played in-state at Saginaw Valley and started then as a volunteer coach and then an assistant coach at Lewis. So what did you learn in that time just starting out? How did that prepare you for the roles you eventually do?
Yeah, so to be honest, I actually started playing a little later than most people who end up kind of as career soccer coaches or players. So I didn't start till a little later. Like, it's not something I was playing when I was 3, 4, or 5 years old. So when I got into it, I actually found out later in life how fortunate I was that I actually had a really good club coach, a really good high school coach. So I grew up in a decent pedigree background with the Michigan Wolves, playing in my home state, and we went to a good high school. Everything was great. When I went to college, I realized there was a lot of instability at Saginaw Valley State. I loved my time there as a player, made lifelong friends. But it also kind of inspired me to get into coaching, because I realized there was a lot of turnover there, a little bit of a lack of discipline when I was a player. And I truly saw really high level potential in some of our teams and some of our guys. And because it didn't maybe come to fruition, really kind of excited me to get into the coaching world early on. So I was a volunteer at Saginaw Valley and kind of just went from there onto Lewis, and then the rest of my path as a head coach at Saginaw Valley, and then Michigan State, and now here. But yeah, I think some of my early experiences as a player kind of really led me into wanting to get into the coaching stuff.
All that sounds great, and I have to bring it up early, 2009. So for those watching, I'll take a moment to set the scene. So you're an assistant coach at Lewis.
Are you going to bring up the video, like in the top corner?
No, unfortunately, I don't have the video, but we tried to get it from the NCAA, where it's not even in the archives anymore. So so you're the assistant coach at Lewis. I'm a junior at Leeds McRae. You guys miss a penalty, then go 2-0 up. It's about 5 or 6 minutes left in the game, and we managed to get 2-2 and win on penalties and get through to the final. But more on a serious note, because I've, as a coach, experienced, as I'm sure you have, tough losses in finals or big games, heartbreakers in the last minute. But more on a serious note, what was the message, I guess, to your team, off the back of that? How do you recover? Is there anything you can say experience in that moment?
It's tough. And first and foremost, for those who didn't know Lee as a player, he was phenomenal, especially in and around the final third, and was coming off an injury at the time. So we weren't even sure how much he was going to play. And, like you said, 12 minutes left in the game, we had already missed a penalty, and it was 0-0. I think with 11 minutes left, we were up 2-0. So we scored like 2 goals in the span of something like 55 seconds or something in the national semifinal. And, there's not a ton you can say when you concede 2 goals in the last 5 minutes, and people's, you end up playing. It was so hot. We were playing in Florida. It was humid. Guys were gassed. We had a long season leading into that, and when it's so final, when you lose a game like that, there's really not a ton to say. But the things that kind of stick out to me and what I remember, I was fortunate. I mean, I was very young. I was probably 24 years old at that time, and was working with Evan Feifels, who's the head coach of Lewis, and I learned a lot in my time with him. And he was such a man of high integrity and pride, and a competitor, and he. We pushed those guys hard, but I learned a lot from him and how to manage that and keep guys fighting and disciplined. And they were devastated. We were devastated. But at the same time, I think he was a guy that was a strong leader and was able to say, listen, keep your chins up. Failure in life happens. And for us, it was a failure. We felt we lost an opportunity, and credit to Lisa McRae and yourself for kind of taking advantage and taking advantage of that opportunity. But we felt we didn't maybe close the game out well enough. And we really just had to look in our eyes and say, look, we cannot make an excuse about this. College soccer is about so much more than the wins and losses. It's about teaching people life lessons, learning life lessons. And for us, I think it was really like, look, the other team got it done today. You know, you can look yourself in the mirror and say you gave everything all year. You put yourself in a great position. You had an amazing season, built relationships, but don't let this moment define you. You know, you can move on, you can reach higher heights, greater achievements in life and your careers and family. For the returners, they obviously got another crack at it the next year, but really it was just about not making excuses, keeping your chin up, being proud, and learning the life lessons from it. And then for me as a coach, I learned a lot myself as well, like how to manage late games, make subs. You know, could we have maybe made some changes or changed some tactics in the last couple minutes? Absolutely. So I think everybody, if you're learning from those experiences, then you're ahead of the other ones who maybe just kind of take a failure as the end of the world and kind of pout about it or make excuses. And for me, it was one of the driving forces to continue pushing to try to reach those heights and play in a national championship game. And something I learned a lot from. And I know those guys have great memories from that season and would have loved it ended differently, but at the end of the day, I think they're better from their experiences as we all are after college athletics, hopefully.
Well, yeah. Well, if it's any consolation, we lost the final 1-0 on a pretty late goal. I think it was 12 minutes left or something. And with how emotional that semi-final was for us, it was then hard. It's one of the downsides of college soccer. You've got to turn around and play less than 48 hours later. And I think Fort Lewis ended up winning their semi-final by a blowout, like 6-1 or 8-1 or something. So they were well rested and they got a late goal. So we experienced, the same thing 2 days later. And it's definitely not easy. But so you've experienced, a Final Four and tremendous success very early on in your career. And then, that propelled you to go back to Saginaw as a head coach this time. And I did the same thing. I graduated in when I played at, and for me there was a lot of positives in going back there, where I knew the infrastructure, I knew the people, I knew the location, I knew what had been successful for us. But in some ways, not having the experience of a different program, I think hurt me in terms of getting started in my coaching career. What were the pros and cons for you going back to Saginaw? Obviously, you wanted to be a head coach, but speak to the pros and cons of going back to where you played.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think my time at Lewis and working with Evan and competing in the GLVC, which was a stronger conference than the GLIAC, it really was an eye-opener for me in a sense that I hadn't been a part of a college program that was so disciplined, so organized. It's what I strive for. I wanted to be a part of that. But like I said, I was recruited by one coach in college, coached by another. And then after my sophomore year, another one came in. And then in my fifth year, when I was a volunteer, another coach came in. So my 5 years in Saginaw Valley, and if you count the sixth year of the year I was recruited, there was 4 different coaches. So to be a part of that, I learned a lot. And like you said, sometimes to see another program and get some experience and then come back kind of gave me a little bit of an advantage where I knew so much of the ins and outs of the state of Michigan, the conference and the GLIAC, the Midwest region, but going to Lewis gave me some outside perspective on how maybe someone else would do it. And so when I came back, I tried my best to take the positives I learned from my experience from Lewis, but not in a cookie cutter sense and just do it the same way Evan did, because I think philosophically and stylistically, we're probably a lot different. I think from a program management and discipline standpoint, very similar. So I tried to kind of take that. So certainly what helped me was my experience in a very successful program, working for a coach that was a longtime coach, went to his second Final Four. Some of the other stuff that really helped me was I had to be ingrained and hands-on in everything. We had a $2,000 assistant budget my first year. And I inherited, I think they were at 3 scholarships, and then we got to like 3.5. So really what helped me was this kind of no excuse mentality. I just came from a program where that's what we preached. And then from my own perspective, taking over, I really had to live it myself. Like I was doing the laundry, making all the travel plans, watching all the film, all the recruiting, everything's, and we were underfunded. We didn't have an indoor facility at the time. There was no strength coach. So it helped me because I really didn't have any way to make an excuse and succeed. Like I knew there was so many obstacles. I just had to embrace it. So as a young coach, I was kind of thrown to the wolves, and I had to make plans and analyze and change my plans constantly and fine tune what was working and what wasn't. So it allowed me a lot of progress to make my own decisions and figure out what to work. I'm also not afraid of change. I think had I been stuck in a program right away at that age that was very like had a long time tradition of doing things the same way, which in a sense, when I went to Michigan State, there was a lot of that tradition, but I felt, and that was a positive at the time, which I'm sure we'll get into, but for me as a younger coach, to have the ability to say, you know what, this isn't working right now, I'm just going to change it and do it differently, and not really have a full staff to like have to argue with or like that, I think helped me. But in a sense, some of the things that hurt me, I could argue the same points. Like I didn't have a staff there. So to progress fully, I think you really need to be able to bounce your ideas off others and be challenged. You know, some of the other things, like because of the underfunding and some of the lack of facilities, it hurt us in a sense, but we just looked at those as obstacles that we just had to find a different way to get around. And I had a great group of guys that took them some time to get used to me, because of the level of expectation and the standard that we set was so high from the start that there were some bumps in the road. But for the ones that bought in, they were unbelievable kids. And for the guys that were those returners that had kind of gone through the bad years into the good years, I think that was a special time for them. But even the new guys that came in, you know, we had to recruit a certain way. Overall, it was a great experience where I can take positives and negatives. But when I look at that, I wouldn't trade anything for that experience. It made me the coach and the person I am today, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's you know, those humble beginnings is something I can definitely relate to as well. I mean, I took over a program that was 2 years removed from a national final, but the reality was the school itself was struggling at the time financially. It took 3 years until I got a full-time paid assistant coach. We were the lowest funded scholarship team in the conference, but like I said, I think the beginnings and having to mow the grass, having to, you know, do the laundry, having to do all those day-to-day stuff, it definitely builds a foundation, as it did for me, you know, so that you then, when you get into a better situation later on, you can certainly appreciate it more. But you spoke there to, you know, the challenges and the recruiting. It was interesting. You made a national final in 2012. I was actually there for the final. A colleague of mine who is a Mercyhurst alum, and they played in the other semi-final to you. Yeah. So I watched you play in the semi-final, believe it or not. But you did it with, I guess, going against the grain for top-level Division II programs. You look at all the top programs in the country and they're heavily international. You did it with all Michigan players, right?
Yeah, it was fun. It was a crazy situation. I mean, I remember the article on the NCAA website. It said Michigan versus the world. We had a 26-man roster with 23 kids from Michigan, and only one.
Almost.
Yeah, technically 2 internationals. We had an English center back from Sunderland, and then we had a Jamaican player, but he came to us by way of New York, where he had lived for a couple years, and then 1 player from outside of Chicago. So pretty much a Michigan-based group. And if you looked at the teams that year especially, but almost every year in Division II, it was Lynn, Mercyhurst, Simon Fraser. But, you know, if you look over the last couple of years, teams like Charleston and some of the other ones, you know, a lot of times Division II teams lean heavily towards internationals, because when the higher end domestic kids are taken and they don't want to drop their standard, you know, they can maybe find a player with a higher pedigree. For us, we weren't really in that situation financially to go after kids that for an in-state school that was low funding, you know, we just weren't going to be able to afford it. So what we tried to do was find the players in our state that made the most sense for what we were trying to do. You know, and I had a quote hung in my office at the time, and I'll probably butcher the wording, and forgive me for not being able to credit someone with this quote, but it was like an anonymous quote that I had seen, and it said something like, I don't recruit players for who they are. I recruit players for who I think they can be. And that was something that we really had to take to heart, especially with the quality Division I programs in the state. You know, you look at schools like Michigan State, University of Michigan, Oakland University, Detroit was taking a lot of those suburban Detroit kids. And then on the west side of the state, you had Western Michigan where a bulk of those west side kids were going. So, you know, it was tough, but what we had to do was, if we couldn't get the highest level kid, maybe we found that kid that we said, you know, maybe he's not at that Big Ten level right now. So maybe he's being offered a walk-on spot, but if we can make it affordable for him and give him the love and attention, and maybe we can get him here because our school is a little more affordable, we can turn him into the player we think he can be. And luckily for me, you know, we had a pretty bought-in group, and the guys that, because our team wasn't that great when I first took over, I think it kind of expedited the development of some of those recruits. You know, I'm a big believer that the game is the best teacher. And I think if you're in a training environment that's competitive and you're playing a lot, certainly you're going to improve. But if you're not getting the game action, you know, it's a little harder to fix your mistakes and to deal with the pressure. And we were at a time where we recruited a bunch of kids my first year, and I think we started something like 8 or 9 freshmen. So for them, as opposed to going to Michigan or Michigan State or Ohio State and redshirting, even though they might have been good enough to compete for minutes, for us, they were key players as freshmen. And that experience, I think, kind of really expedited their development and their process. And we were able to kind of turn players into maybe what another coach would see as a marginal player. We were able to turn them into above average, like all-American level in some cases, in our situation. And I think it was really just finding a niche of the type of player we wanted. And for me, I had some of my own personal and philosophical development. My first year there, we weren't able to play like a highly possession attacking brand. And I was a more attack-minded midfielder. So for me, I had to really say, like, this first year, we got to hunker down and get the discipline, the defend first, be a team that counterattacks. But every year we kind of built up and progressed and changed a little bit to the mold that we wanted to become. And it was a great couple years. But yeah, we had to play some money ball. We had to save dollars and cents where we could and recruit those kids and get the most bang for our buck.
Was the selling point then the fact that you could offer more playing time early in their career, you know, as opposed to sitting the bench at a Big Ten school or, you know, another program? Was that then kind of what was your niche in terms of being able to attract them to your program?
Yeah, I think that's a huge piece of it. You know, I'm not one to ever promise out playing time, but certainly you can project some things and tell kids, like, look, if you come in fit and sharp, you know, we only return 1 center forward. Mm-hmm. You know, you can kind of paint a picture, and if a kid believes in himself and believes in the vision of the program, you know, they can get on board with that. So playing time was huge. The financial aid piece, again, like I said, playing money ball, finding the kids that maybe got more in-state academic money at Saginaw Valley than they would have somewhere else. You know, trying to find ways to get them excited, whether it be, you know, our quote unquote lack of success in some regards can actually excite a kid because there was a new coach coming to town, a new standard. You know, they knew a lot of younger players in the area, maybe even knew my name before I took over, just because I was tied in with a lot of younger clubs, like my youth clubs, and maybe just being a little more relatable and a little more aggressive on some things early, I think just got some kids excited. And I think it kind of steamrolled, to be honest. Like our first year we won 9 games, and after that it became a little easier to recruit. I mean, I think that the recruits then saw the progress. I think once there's a glimmer of progress, I think there's a big kind of jump you can make in the level of kid you can bring in, because they see what you're saying is actually coming to fruition. So if I was giving all these empty promises that first cycle, and then we won 3 games and I didn't play a lot of young guys, it would have been much harder for me in year 2. And in year 2, we brought in some key guys that helped in year 3, which was that run to the national final. So again, playing some money ball, painting a vision, you know, having kids believe in what you're saying by being maybe a little more charismatic or aggressive, but again, I think what it came down to was me holding up my end of the bargain early. And once kids saw that the soccer world is so small, the club world is so small, that people know the experiences of their friends and club mates that are a year, 2, 3 years older.
Yeah.
So if you're not treating guys the right way, if you're not holding up your end of the bargain, I think you'll be found out in our game. And not to say that that's why you should be holding up your end of the bargain. You should have high integrity because it's the right thing to do. But in some regards, it's a byproduct of that is the word of mouth of your program and how that program is seen from the outside. So certainly that
it becomes a reputation thing, doesn't it? If you're building a good culture, one person tells another, it's that knock-on effect that, your reputation then starts to spread that you're leading a good program. How important then, you've got maybe not at least talent-wise, maybe not the top kids in the state, but you're able to win a lot of games. You're able to, win championships within a couple of years. How then is, the culture becoming, really important? And what did you do to sort of drive that? Was it player-led? Did you have to, carry the weight of that early on? How important was that culture?
Yeah, and I'll kind of start this by saying I believe in any organization, any team, any family, like whatever you're trying to accomplish. I even have this written in some places and saved, but it's culture is greater than talent. And I've seen it year in and year out in every sport at every level. The teams that believe in each other, that fight for each other, that enjoy training, that enjoy time off the field, they have trust. Those teams are more apt to get through the adverse moments and the tough battles. So I was huge on team building early. I mean, I can remember our first preseason, we did like a canoe and camping trip where we had guys around the bonfire telling stuff about themselves that they hadn't told before. And I think becoming more vulnerable in front of your teammates, but then also stuff like we do like blindfold obstacle courses and, get them out of their comfort zone, shooting a basketball challenge every once in a while or a classroom activity where they're really just kind of opening up and becoming more of a team and more of a family. That stuff is crucial for me. And so what we couldn't maybe bring in terms of talent at times, we just accepted that. We said, okay, we're going to get the best kids we can and turn them into the best players we can, but our whole can be also greater than the parts. So if we can focus on our team camaraderie, our team cohesion, we're gonna make some strides early. So I'm a big believer of that. I have been a big believer of that always, even as a player, but I've been fortunate to be, and now this is my 4th program. But at Lewis, it was a big deal, and we saw success on the field from it. Saginaw Valley, same thing. Was fortunate to be a part of the staff for 4 years at Michigan State, where we made some big strides in some team building stuff, and I think it paid some big dividends in our runs to the quarterfinal and the College Cup. And certainly here, my guys will tell you it's almost to a fault in a cheesy way. Like I make them do these activities before training sometimes, and they're like, "Why are we doing this?" But by the end of it, I think that over time, that there's a lot of things that come from it. Like I said, trust, laughs, banter, competition, relationships that pay a long way, not just on the field, but you build relationships for life after college as well. And I think that's part of this big time.
Yeah, and like you said there, it's the moments where you need that, is more so in the tough times, whether it's on the pitch and you're a goal down with a few minutes to play, your cultural, the standards that you accept and promote within your program is what's going to pull you through those moments. But then also, if there's something that bad happens off the field, or to one of your players or to the program as a whole, that cultural stand that takes time for sure. So so you prepared for the national final in 2012. Didn't go your way on that day, but what were your preparations? I asked Coach Mack at PBA this last week what his preparations were, and he said he took kind of took the pressure off his team and took them to a waterfall and gave them a game plan and made them believe how they could win. What were your preparations like for that final? And in hindsight, with more experience now, would you approach it any differently?
I would say this, and this has been, I think, a constant of all three programs where I've gone to maybe a Final Four or a national final, is that all those groups were extremely disciplined, but also knew that they could be loose when the time was appropriate. And so
Finding that
that was
balance.
no, yeah. I mean, I think I encourage guys to have banter and jokes on the bus, they're sticking things in guys' ears while they're sleeping and taking pictures. Like, that's part of it. You even look at the pros at the highest level. If you look at these, documentaries, you see what a grind it is, but then they show the stuff behind the scenes. Like, they're enjoying each other, they're enjoying their time. And so I've always pushed my teams and myself to kind of raise the standard and have some tough battles and challenges that are maybe look like a mountain when you first start climbing them. But with that group, I mean, I can remember even on that trip, like, one of our backup goalies, it was a funny story, but one of our center midfielders, after training the day before the final, he left to go to lunch with one of his family members. So he didn't ride the team bus back with us to the hotel. And I'd asked my goalkeeper to do a head count real quick. We didn't even have a team manager at the time. And he went back, did a head count, told me everybody was there. And I kind of thought to myself, well, wait a second, I know not everybody's here. Like, one of us left with their family. So what we did is I got like 5, 7, 10 guys on board. Everybody was on board. It got passed down. And then halfway through the trip back to the hotel, we said, hey, where's Zach? Where's Zach Vassell? He's one of our center midfielders. And our goalkeeper started to kind of freak out. And he was like, wait, I counted everybody. So we started kind of telling him, like, no, you're tricking us. And then he started to get really worried because he was like, wait a second, I thought I counted everybody. Did I miss somebody? And it was like, we were lighthearted like that. And they knew that I could be lighthearted with them in those moments. But we also knew when it came time to watch video, team meeting, train, like, to pick it up and kind of flip that switch. So I was never afraid, even with that team who was in the 2 previous years. I mean, I had to be like a drill sergeant with them to kind of get to that level. But eventually, in the words of Jocko Willink, if you follow him at all, the discipline equals freedom. Like, the more they were disciplined, the more we were disciplined, the more freedom we had to have some jokes and loosen up. So we did a lot of that kind of stuff of getting away from the rigidness of robotic coaching. And I was able to loosen up with them and give them freedom to get away from the field and have some fun. As far as changing anything in preparation, the 2 things I look back on is trying to get a little more film. At that time in 2012, before the days of Instat, with our budget, we were able to watch them in the semifinal. Lynn, which was a team that very prominent Division II team coming off of a final the year before. It was only our second NCAA tournament in school history. We were in the national final playing against a team that was there the year before. We had 23 Michigan kids. They had, I think, 13 grad students and 25 internationals or something. Very good experienced program. I would have liked to get a little more video for myself. I didn't like overloading that team with video because we played our own way. So maybe a little bit more video for myself in the preparations. And then I would have probably tried to give one more quick reminder right before the game to try to prevent set pieces. We were a team that year. We gave up 4 set pieces all year. I think we played something like 25 games. 2 of them were in the final. Okay. And I don't blame any individual player at all. Like, I think we were a little outmatched size-wise on some of their set pieces and everything else. But had we maybe had that a little bit of a focus, we gave up, for those that didn't watch the game, which I'm sure many listening to this didn't, we gave up a set piece 5 minutes into the game, 3 to 5 minutes into the game from a wide area, which really just changed the landscape of the game. And I think maybe a quick reminder, even if we just got out of that first 10 minutes without giving up a set piece, I really think the game changes. But from our approach and what we trained and our mentality and how we prepared, I think we really did a lot of things right. I don't have much regrets, but I think looking back, you can always say, hey, let's try not to follow them in a dangerous area for the first 5 minutes to give them any confidence, And
I guess, no matter what preparation you go through and, trying to take the pressure off or the reminder of set pieces, the one thing you can't give your team that Lynn had is the experience of being there the year before. So, that experience obviously, counts for a lot, but still an unbelievable achievement. So then you you go through a period of 5 years with tremendous success, with limited budgets and largely Michigan kids. Was it a goal of yours to even move to the Division I level, to be an assistant, or to stay as a head coach? Or was it just, the opportunity proved to be the right one at the right time in terms of Michigan State? What was the process there?
It's funny because, and literally, and Lee, I'm not lying, we just got off of a goal setting Zoom call with my team. I'm big on goal setting. And, we were talking about SMART goals, actually, like being very specific, measurable, all these things. But when I was early in my coaching career, my goals were more year to year. I wasn't thinking 5 years down the line. I wanted to make sure that I was putting my team in a position that every year we were progressing, and then myself, I wasn't saying like in 5 years I need to be a Division I head coach, or I was really kind of just going year to year and saying I need to make sure I'm learning the most I can, progressing, improving my team and myself. And when the opportunity arose to become to join Michigan State as an assistant, some people thought I was like crazy. They would say, why would you go from being a head coach? You're having success. We went to another Sweet 16 that year. We had come off of a final a couple years before. And for me, like, it wasn't just about the short term or having the control to say I'm a head coach. Like, I wanted experiences. I wanted to learn. I wanted to be in a staff that I knew would challenge me, but where I could also still contribute. So as far as being an assistant or going on to be a head coach, I think it was more case by case. I was looking at things and analyzing them individually and saying, and at the time I actually had a couple opportunities for like a lower mid-major head coaching opportunity. And I asked myself, am I going to be fully prepared for this role to do the best job I can? Or would it be more advisable for me to maybe go work in the Big Ten for a couple years and learn from a staff and have different challenges and have to play against Maryland and Indiana and really challenge myself, because then when I do take over another program, I will potentially be hopefully more prepared for it. I think it ended up being the best case scenario where I was very fortunate to work in the state of Michigan. So it wasn't a huge life transition for me, where I was able to make probably a quicker, I was able to contribute quicker in my time there because I had so much experience in the state, and they had a similar formula of recruiting, just maybe a notch to 2 notches higher level players at times. But also a staff that was very, cohesive, and a head coach that was gave us a lot of leeway and freedom and a voice, and so I was able to continue developing and contributing right away, and it certainly prepared me for my role in taking over here as a SIUE. But it was important to me to put myself in a position where it was a little out of my comfort zone. I didn't play Division I soccer. I hadn't coached Division I soccer yet, and I knew that. The kicker is that Michigan State was coming off 2 national quarterfinals, but just graduated 8 or 9 seniors, including 3 guys that got drafted in MLS. So I knew we had our hands full, and we were going to have to rebuild for a couple of years. And that was an exciting challenge and was so much fun to be a part of, and learned a ton, and certainly has helped me prepare myself for the role here at SIUE, which has been a fun year and a half.
I'm always intrigued by that head coach, assistant coach sort of dynamic, because I've not experienced being an assistant coach yet, and I think it's maybe one of the flaws in myself as a head coach, in that it's taken me a little bit longer to fully appreciate the role, or to empower the assistant, with more responsibilities. And it's definitely maybe later down the road something I'd be keen to experience somewhere along the line. But what were the major differences then, aside from obviously, the wins and the losses falls on the head coach's, plate, in terms of responsibility? What are the major differences? How did your role change then from being the one seemingly calling the shots to being the assistant then at Michigan State?
It was good. The roles changed a lot, obviously, at Saginaw Valley. I mean, I was literally the only voice most of the time. I had a couple part-time assistants who were very, very valuable in the time that they spent with us. But at the same time, I was calling all the shots and making all the session plans. And if I got something in my head and thought it was right, like I was going to go with it, you know. And I'll reference Jocko Willink again in a book that I'm reading by him. He talks a lot in leadership about detaching and kind of taking a step back at times. And joining Michigan State allowed me to be in a staff with a very highly reputable head coach and assistant coach that had been there a few years. And we could kind of then take turns and figure out who's going to be the voice running this part of the session, while the other two could then take a step back and detach a little bit. So I was able for the first time in 5 years to take a step back in the middle of training. And instead of watching what's happening in the chaos of the big picture, to maybe focus on an individual or just the back line for 5 minutes and tell Damon, hey, I'm going to focus on the back line while you kind of watch the big picture stuff. And that allowed me to kind of learn and see things from a different perspective. It allowed me to take some emotion out. I think there's a lot of coaches that are highly emotional during games. I was very fortunate to come into a situation with the staff there. They had been there for years and years, where I could just say, okay, what do I need to do to support this staff? And maybe at times it was in a game, I'm going to take my emotion out of it because the two other coaches might be more emotionally ingrained, and maybe take more of a tactical viewpoint for the next 10 minutes. And I think allowing myself to kind of jump in and out of certain roles, it allowed me to not only appreciate the need for those roles, but also prepared me that saying, you know, when I do eventually become a head coach, these are all little things I want to make sure my staff are doing. And our staff management with Damon, the way he was able to give us responsibilities, but also hold us accountable and give us the freedom to run with stuff, but also kind of keep him in the loop, I think was things that I learned a ton from. But certainly it's got to be the right fit, and there are certain people that can't do it. And for you, it might be not a great decision if it's not the right fit. I don't think it makes sense for someone that's a successful head coach just to go be an assistant, just to say they're in a Division I staff. Like, yeah. I think you got to be somewhere where you think you can contribute, learn, have a good experience. You know, you have a family, is it somewhere you want to live? There's so many factors. But yeah, I had to adjust a lot of my roles and take a step back at times, figure out what battles to fight, what were the battles that were important. I think sometimes as an assistant, you know, you see a thing as a problem, or where your head coach might only focus on the big picture stuff. And I had to kind of understand that. And it helped me become a head coach and kind of realize, like, there's not enough time for me to control everything. I've got to let my assistants have the green light and the leeway. And I learned a lot in my time there. And obviously the game experiences spoke for themselves. I mean, playing in the Big Ten, playing non-conference games, you know, on the West Coast and against the Akrons of the world. And you know, it was a really beneficial experience in my career.
No, I think that's fascinating, because I was literally having that discussion with our assistant coach, Dale Parker, here this morning, about that detachment. You know, sometimes as a head coach, you have to take yourself out of, you know, running the session itself, so that you can, you know, analyze it a little bit more, take the emotion out of it a little bit, and then also, like you said, maybe concentrate on a particular individual or a unit, you know, back four or the attacking players or whatever it might be. But it also just basically triggered a memory from this past season, where we're at our main rivals away from home. We go 2-0 down literally in the first 10-15 minutes, and you know, it's an emotional game. It's pouring down rain. We're 2-0 down away from home. It's freezing cold, and everybody's trying to shout and scream and get our players motivated. And I didn't need to do that, because I had staff, I had players on the team already doing that for me. So that allowed me to detach myself a little bit and actually see, all right, how now can we get back in the game? And we made a subtle adjustment with our wide players, which gave us more control in the game. And before halftime, it was back to 2-2. So, you know, that detachment is, I think, a valuable tool. So what then attracted you to, you know, you've experienced head coach, you've experienced Division I. were you keen then to get, back into being a head coaching role, or again, was it just sort of the right opportunity and the right time at SIUE?
It was I would say a combination of both. I mean, I always went into my time at Michigan State fully committed and telling myself like I would never be that guy that neglects my roles there because I have the itch to be a head coach. Like I think there's a tendency for in any profession when you're looking always for the next thing that you can maybe neglect what you're doing. So it was great. Damon and I had some open conversations, and with full transparency, we both kind of knew what his thought process was if I ever wanted to eventually move on, and I knew what I was going to look for if that opportunity ever arose. So I kind of looked and planned all that stuff a year or two before I even had an opportunity that I would want. So when the time came, I wouldn't have to, like, let's say it was mid-season or right after the season, I wouldn't have to like think for too long. So I made some thoughts in my head that like, let's call them some requirements of things I was looking for, of like school size, did I want public versus private, location, conference, all these factors that I could easily rank quickly. And so when certain jobs opened up, I could kind of weigh out the reality. And then I also had to ask myself, am I prepared? Have I gotten enough out of this experience at Michigan State, or is there more I want to learn? And certainly I could have stayed there for 10 years and learned something new every week, every year, every month. But it came to a point after my 4th year there, my wife was also 7.5 months pregnant. So we were kind of thinking about more long-term and settling down and buying a house. And, to be honest, when SIUE opened up, it checked just so many boxes off those things that I was looking at, where I'd analyzed a couple other jobs, some head jobs that I kind of pulled my name out of the hat, kind of said they have a lot of pros, but also some cons that maybe I didn't want to deal with. And some of those were just geography or other things. And, Mario Sanchez, who was here before me, he's now with Louisville City. He did a great job here and laid a good foundation. It was a program I was familiar with because, I had actually played against SIUE back in my day as a player in a year in 2004 or 5 when they went to either the semifinal or the national final. So I knew the history and the reputation here. And, the program had won 2 national championships in the past. So I really liked the idea of going somewhere with so much history. Saginaw Valley in my time there was a much younger program, and most of the alumni connections were guys I played with we were in our late 20s, maybe early 30s. And then when I went to Michigan State, I really got to see that other side of it, and be a part of a program that had such a rich tradition. And, you had alums that were 70 years old coming to talk to the team. It was so cool to be a part of that. And so I really wanted to be a part of something that had a rich history and a strong alumni base, because I think, I say this to the teams a lot, is that like the program is bigger than any individual, and that includes the coach. And so I wanted to be somewhere where like there was a feeling of a bigger picture, and our alumni base and history here, the school size, there were so many positives. The MAC conference is a strong soccer conference, from top to bottom, and I'll name them all because it's a small conference, but Northern Illinois, West Virginia, Akron, Bowling Green, and Western Michigan, and ourselves, it's a small conference, but extremely high quality. And I wanted to be somewhere where I felt we could compete for championships in a strong conference. And, it's been a great experience so far. Inherited a group with 10 seniors this year that were used to a certain way, with a very good coach. So certainly there was some ups and downs and some challenges and some conflicts, some healthy conflict when we were trying to make some changes. But extremely happy with the group that I've worked with, and really excited about going forward with these guys.
You mentioned earlier about, you're not afraid of change, and you said there you had a group of 10 seniors coming in who've been used to, for 3 years, a certain way. Were you conscious then not to try and go and change too much, too soon?
Yeah, and I think I learned some things along the way as well. I had a really mature group of seniors, and I did my best and was very intentional with the things that I cut and changed. And some of those were very hard lines. And I said, look, this is my way or the highway, but here's the why. And I would always try to explain it, get guys on board. But those few rules I would say were few, but they were strong. Then there was a lot of the stuff in the middle that was flexible, and there were some things that they did previously that they were really passionate about that we kept. There were some things that maybe I didn't realize how passionate they were about them, and that we changed them, and then we had some conflict and had to understand each other's viewpoints. And I think at the end of the day, by the time the season ended, I think we really made great strides. And I think that conflict sometimes is healthy, even between players and coaches. And I think sometimes everybody thinks it's okay for players to have conflict with each other or staffs behind closed doors. But I'm also a believer that between players and staff, as long as it's healthy and constructive and professional, that a player shouldn't just say yes because I say something if they don't understand the why. And I shouldn't just tell someone what to do just because I said so. I should have a reason. And so I thought this year was a great learning experience for me on player management as well. And think I grew as a coach, but also had players that were mature enough to bring stuff to our attention if they didn't think it was right. And at times we explained the why and we went with the coaching staff's way. At other times we understood their viewpoint and leaned more towards the way they wanted to do it or saw things. And then other times we found a middle ground. But I think that's something, it's a really delicate balance. Coaching's not an exact science. Recruiting's not exact science. You have to have that dichotomy of like holding a hard line on things, but also being flexible and having leeway on others.
Yeah, I'm very similar. I think that's key. I do rely on my players' input on certain things or a lot of things as much as possible. You said a while ago that and I'll wrap it up with this because you've been very generous with your time, but in that goal setting and your projections for next year, maybe the year after, do you lean heavily on the players then and in setting those goals?
Yeah, like we have some overarching goals, and we're not afraid to talk in our program about some of those goals. But I'm a real believer that like if you set an overarching goal, so let's say you want to be a Division I head coach one day for yourself, and I don't know if that's what you want to do, or you want to win a national championship there at Lander. That might be the overarching goal, but to get there, you have to make, plenty of other goals and plans along the way. Mm-hmm. So although we have a couple key overarching goals, some I brought in to the table and just said, look, this is the standard. This is what we're reaching for because I know the potential of this program. And there's others that the team worked on. The plans to get there and some of their individual small goals and some of our other small goals, certainly a huge part of that is coming from the players. They know my vision and our vision and in the recruiting process are well prepared for the standard we're setting. But you think about the next 3 months, I mean, we have guys, we're not going to be able to hold guys to fitness programs or be checking in on them. So if they really want to reach our overarching goals, they need to set some goals for themselves for the summer or, some plans. And when we do stuff, we do it more holistically. I always try to include like an academic goal, a personal goal. Like we have guys on our team that maybe are working on something for their academic program or working on a foreign language. I try to make it more holistic so they understand it's really not just about wins and losses. It's about understanding how to plan for goals, analyze, adapt, improvise, change, reevaluate, test, retest, all this stuff to make them more prepared for life after college soccer. And I think if we're doing that as coaches, then we're doing our job. But yeah, I've included this group on a lot of stuff. I think at my early years at Saginaw Valley, because of the culture we inherited, those first 2 years, it was more black and white coming from the coach. Here's why. And then as they became more disciplined and mature, and we gave them more freedom to go and contribute more, and they were excellent. And at Michigan State, similar. And now I think I've inherited a group that's very mature, and we've kind of changed some philosophical things and playing style things and really defined some overarching goals, but they have a huge part of this process. And I hope it leads to more buy-in and success from the group, but certainly they bring so much to the table that if I was not including them and stuff, I think I would be doing the program an injustice, only relying on my own brain, which admittedly, I want and need that support from other staff members, whether it's administrators, support staff, players. if I'm not including everyone and trying to find the right answer, not just my answer, I think we're doing a disservice. So yeah, they're involved, and they've got some high goals and plans, and I'm excited to see where it takes them.
Yeah, I think it's definitely important that the coach sets the right tone and gets the ball rolling. But you know, if the players are the ones sort of driving the culture and the standards and holding people accountable, then they can take true ownership of the, you know, the end result. And I think you mentioned there, it's holistic. It's not just what happens on the pitch. If you're on top of things academically, if your sleeping patterns are good, if your recovery is good, if your nutrition's good, all of which the players have to take an element of control over themselves, then, you know, they're going to be in much better position then to perform on the pitch, you know, for the program. So brilliant. I think that was absolutely fascinating, unbelievable insight. I think that will help me, but anybody else watching, and we certainly appreciate your time.
No, I appreciate it. I think, you know, these interviews, these conversations, these meetings, I think they've become so much more prominent in the world of social media and technology, and obviously the whole COVID situation. But it's exciting to see you. You're a coach. You're a player that impressed me when you played. I've followed your career. I'm excited to follow these interviews. I watched Max, who's also a friend of mine and a really good coach. So I'm honored that you invited me on. So keep up the good work, and I'll see you around the fields, hopefully when we're allowed to recruit again soon.
Yeah, exactly. I can't wait to get back out there. But again, we appreciate your time. So thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot.